Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. We are welcoming Bay McFarland from Mary's Advocates. Good morning.
Good morning.
Interesting name, Mary's Advocates. Where does it come from? What do you do?
Mary's Advocates name is just because advocates has to do with one who speaks on behalf of. And Mary's Advocates is trying to reduce unilateral no-fault divorce. And there's not very many voices speaking on behalf of those who are trying to reduce unilateral no-fault divorce. And we also support those who are unjustly abandoned.
What is unilateral no-fault divorce?
Okay. Unilateral is one party can force a divorce on the other party who doesn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
In the old days, we used to only have fault-based divorce. So it was kind of more the scriptural understanding that, if someone's doing something really bad, you could separate. Mm-hmm. And that would be if someone's committing adultery or gravely abusive, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened in the late 60s and the early 70s with the sexual revolution, all the states started changing it so you could do no-fault divorce where no party had to confess or be found guilty of anything. So what ended up happening is one party comes forward and says, I want a divorce. And by the mere fact of them saying that, the court, the state, supposedly, they do it. What they do is the state then forces a divorce on the other spouse and children.
There used to be grounds. Are there still grounds?
Some states have grounds. Some states have a combination of grounds and no fault. Some states only have no fault. Since our audience is Ohio is a combination of fault-based grounds and no fault grounds. But what the lawyers do, I did a mini survey, what the lawyers do, one party wants a divorce, the other party might be doing something bad, but what they'll have them do is file for no-fault grounds like incompatibility. Mm-hmm. Or in Ohio, it's incompatibility, and then it's also separate and apart for a year. So from everybody I know, what happens is one party files for divorce in Ohio. The other party might not even know the law that they can try to stop a divorce right away, but they don't know that. And then the court and the lawyers work together to make it draw out for a year. So once you have court paperwork going back and forth for a year, then everybody has their grounds for the no-fault divorce. And the big distinction about no-fault and fault-based, because I'm not against divorce, well, I sort of am, but if we had fault-based divorce,
yes,
we could have more justice. Like,
yes,
you married with children.
Yes.
Okay, say your husband, for whatever reason, has a midlife crisis, moral lapse. He starts having an adulterous affair. Adultery is such an offense against the promises of marriage that a lot of people would say that's a legitimate reason for separation of spouses. Mm-hmm. But if he's committing adultery, what would a just outcome look like? Should he still provide a lot of support if he was providing support up till that point? Should he be taking the children on overnight visits? Can you imagine as a mom having your teenage children spend overnight visits with dad and his new adultering partner? Mm-hmm. Any morally grounded person would find that reprehensible. Mm-hmm. But in the courts, that's normal.
But that would be the example that's being set for the children.
Yep.
And that is kind of like saying this is just another way.
The children are given a horrible example by their father, but with the power of the state, the legislators of Ohio, the court will tell the mom who's horrified by the idea that her children are forced to spend overnight visits with daddy and his new adultering partner, they'll tell that mom, something's wrong with you because we're a no-fault state and dads have rights to their kids. And so my concern is the outcome during these marriage crises. The crises have been occurred for centuries. We're not going to stop those.
Exactly. And I don't know a marriage that doesn't face some kind of big test of time. The marriages face tests. There are hurdles. But if you work together as a team to get over the hurdle, then you find the marriage is stronger at the end of those.
Right.
If it becomes one person against another person, then that you got some problems there.
And what happens with unilateral no-fault divorce, you have one person who wants a divorce against the other person. The second person wants to reconcile. They don't want divorce. They don't want separation. There's nothing they can do about it, and the state courts take over.
Can a person still contest a divorce?
In Ohio, if someone files for a no-fault right away and they use the incompatibility as a ground, in Ohio, denying incompatibility means that ground is not usable. It's off the table. So then
because you're not compatible on your idea of what's causing it? Because one person's saying, we're not compatible. Yes, we are. And right there, that sounds like a fight.
It doesn't matter. It's not up to the discretion of the court to decide whether or not the parties are so horribly incompatible that grounds for divorce exist. The court has to go by the law. In Ohio, the legislators said, If one party comes forward and says incompatibility is a grounds for divorce, and the other party says, I don't want divorce, then up till a year goes by, the second party can stop a divorce. But what sometimes happens is the lawyers don't inform the defendant of that. The lawyers don't inform the defendant that you can say, I don't want a divorce, and I deny incompatibility, and my spouse has to just drop the case because there's no grounds to be here. The court has no power to take over our family whatsoever.
So is that right? I think most people do not know that.
Well, then let's repeat that.
Yes,
so that
please
clear.
say it again.
Okay. In Ohio, a party who wants a divorce will go to the lawyer, and the lawyer will say, you need to say incompatibility is a grounds for divorce. The judge cannot take over a family and decide how to split everything up unless the judge has the grounds that the legislators gave them. In Ohio, if the divorce defendant says, I don't want a divorce, I deny incompatibility, then the person who's wanting the divorce can't use that ground anymore. The case could be dismissed just because grounds don't exist.
What happens then? Two people go back home, and wow, how do you make it work at that point?
Well, there's a difference between making it work. Meaning what? Meaning both parties want to work on being normal spouses?
Yes.
Or you can't make somebody work on being a good normal spouse. You can't. So you can't force someone to do what they don't want to do. But what we could do is minimize the damage to the children and the spouse who wants to keep the family together.
How do we do that?
In my dream world, we would have marriage crises managed according to the understanding of marriage that people use going into marriage. So in other words, if you married under a Christian tradition where adultery is horrible and you never want your kids to spend overnight visits with your partner, with your spouse, and their new adultering partner.
Yes.
If that's what you went into marriage understanding. And there's a couple, if that was your understanding. So years down the road, God forbid, one of you does go start having an adulterous relationship and wants to go live with their new partner, the outcome could be, say, the children stay in their own home. The children don't have to go back and forth. The kids didn't want to go back and forth in the first place.
They didn't sign up for that.
And a lot of children from what I'm told by friends who grew up in divorced homes, they're creeped out by the new second adulterous partner.
Right.
They want their mom and dad together. They have an emotional reaction when someone gets all PDA with someone that's, it's bad enough when your parents are having PDA with each other. It's a little uncomfortable. But at least sitting next to each other, holding hands, arm in arm. A normal kid feels really good when they know their mom and dad are in a good relationship.
Yeah.
But when they see dad doing that with someone else, the normal kid is creeped out. But then we have the divorce lawyers and the divorce psychologists telling the children, there's something wrong with you. Your parents are better if they're happy. I'm going off on a tangent here. I could talk so long.
My goodness. That just sounds so wrong because I know I've heard this a million times. The best thing you can do for your children is for a husband and wife to love each other. And that provides the child with so much stability. We're talking about taking their little world and ripping that rug right out from under them and then expecting them to just buck up and be okay with it.
Right. There's a book that came out not even less than a year ago, Primal Loss, The Now Adult Children of Divorce Speak.
What have we learned? Because we didn't have this many children from divorce. When I was young, it was very rare. Very, very rare. In fact, that would be almost a stigma for the child that they came from a family of divorce. It was like one in, oh my gosh, however many kids I knew, hundreds of kids. And now it's so commonplace that kids talk about their many, many grandparents. And yeah, it's great. They make out really well at Christmas time because they've got so many grandparents. What do we know now that it's become so common in this book, Primal Loss?
Right.
What does it tell us about this generation of kids who are now adults?
The editor of this book just pulled together stories. She had a blog. She was a mom. She's writing her blog about Christian mom, and she ends up starting to correspond with these people who are adult children of divorce. And she was really surprised at how heart-wrenching their stories were and how they were so upset by it. Because the culture says, kids are resilient.
Right.
They'll be better off if they know their moms and dads are happy. Then that will make the kids better. So what she found is that these kids, even 30, 40, 50 years old, even if your mom and dad divorced when you're 25, you're really upset about it. And some of the older people are still wishing, one person's mom passed away, say. And when her mom passed away, yes, she was sorry she lost her mom, but she also was sorry because she was always hoping they would reconcile. It's in her. So maybe somebody thought that this was a social experiment that was going to work out well. and it's not working out well. So what Mary's Advocates is trying to do is get the public conversation going. Let's look at what are we doing with families in marriage crisis?
Yes.
What is the culture saying to them, and what are the courts saying to them? Because what's happening now, say, for example, the woman who's kind of bored with her husband, she's annoyed with him. He's not bad. He's not doing anything dangerous. She doesn't have a justified reason to, he's not committing adultery.
Right.
But maybe she's gotten a job. This is what I hear. I hear from the dads whose wives are abandoning them because the wives are involved in the career. They're getting their affirmation outside of the home. The children are older, so they don't need mom as much. These women are dumping their husbands, so to speak. Well, the mom is told by her divorce lawyer, you have a right to a divorce. Everyone has a right to a divorce. It reminds me of right to an abortion. But then the moms are also told you have a right to the property, you have a right to support and alimony, and if you get to keep those kids in your home, you have a right to child support. So the legislation through the lawyers is telling the woman, you have a right to this, and I'm going to get it for you. What if the legislators instead said, the lawyers or the community instead said, ma'am, you signed up to be married for life.
Yes.
Marriage is a stability in which our culture is built. If you insist on abandoning your husband, we're not going to bring the sheriffs to your house to chain you to your house or whatever. But you will not get his money. You will not get the marital property. As a matter of fact, you're going to be required to repair the damage that you did. So say you're the mom who works outside the home and you're bringing in, $30,000 a year. You're going to still have to bring a lot of that money back to the marital home. You leave, but you can't take the property or the children with you. How many of those women would reconsider what they're doing?
I think they would. And I've also wondered about this. Take a look at the people having this relationship outside of marriage. Okay, when the person first got married, they didn't know whether or not they were marrying someone capable of having a relationship outside of marriage. That was an unknown. But if you are involved with someone who's married and they become involved with you, you know for sure you're dealing with someone who's willing to have a relationship outside of marriage. And what tells you that you would be the special one, that they wouldn't then go have another relationship outside of marriage? Because you're seeing it firsthand. That never made sense to me.
Why someone would enter a second or third marriage?
Yes. Knowing for sure. I know for sure you would have an affair because you had an affair with me.
Right.
I don't understand how that seems like a real good bargain.
You're making sense to me.
I make sense?
Part of what we're trying to do in reducing unilateral no-fault divorce is to invite people to make more clear in the beginning what we intend when we go into marriage. And we don't want this kind of marriage that the legislators set up. Like, the legislators aren't just supposed to make up contracts for people. So we're inviting people to sign what they intend to do when they marry and try to have that be something that can be held up in court. So that years down the road, if one of the people have a midlife crisis, instead of being aided and abetted by lawyers, they're going to be getting good Christian counsel.
Yes.
Because that's what they signed up for.
Yes. If you can get back to that, where there was a reason that we wanted to get married in the first place, can we get back to that? Or, some will say, oh, there's too much water under the bridge now. There have been too many things that have been said that can't be unsaid. I say this. It didn't take too much. The astronauts who were out there, and I've got a point. It's going to take me a while to get to it. There were astronauts out there, and they were lost on Apollo 13. It did not take the slightest little movement to get them back on track. The slightest little change can make a huge change in the long run. Does that make sense? So if people are seeing that my marriage is off track, making a slight adjustment at this point, down the road, can make a huge difference. Does that make sense?
Because when you did it with your hands,
yes,
the listener can't see what you're doing with your
well,
hands,
my
but
hand
you're
is
pointing
going. The trajectory.
Like,
you make a tiny little adjustment, and that trajectory down the road can really move you back onto the same wavelength again.
And the other thing I'm encouraged about, there are couples who have been through crisis who are coming forward and telling their stories. There are counselors who specialize on working with helping marriages. Humanity hasn't changed all that much in the last 2,000 years. Like, the same selfishness or pride or look at lack of communication, whatever it is, we all have it. We all come into a marriage
We're
with
flawed,
issues.
right? Two flawed people uniting. What are you going to get? Right.
Right, and God knew that. That's why He
Yes,
said, I mean,
that's
so many
right.
people promise good times and bad, sickness and health.
That's it.
Bad times are going to come, so let's manage those bad times in a way that agrees with what you signed up with in the beginning. It's part of what we're doing.
You can make each other better. Before we go to a break, I'm going to just throw this one thing. Before our kids got married, this is what I told them. No marriage works out. There's not been a marriage in the history of the world that's ever worked out. Two people work out a marriage. It's not something you can let it ride. You got to work on it. It takes work, and you can't just let it ride. All right, we are going to take a short break. Visiting with Bay McFarland from Mary's Advocates. You're listening to Our Community.